Welcome everyone to our first Solidarity event for Storytime Solidarity. This is our first, and I certainly hope it won't be our last. Really excited that the Association of Jewish Libraries, and especially Heidi Rabinowitz, invited us to join today. Really excited to learn from our amazing panel of experts, which Stephanie Gagnon, creator of Library for the Kind, will be introducing for us. Thank you everyone for joining us.
Hi, everybody. My name is Stephanie Gagnon, and I'm from Library for the Kind, and I'm thrilled to announce our panelists from the Association of Jewish Libraries. First panelist is Heidi Rabinowitz. Please let me know if I pronounce anybody's name wrong. Heidi is a librarian, and she's a writer and the host of Book of Life podcast. And she's also a guest blogger and Storytime Solidarity with us. Susan Kussel, she's also a librarian. You see a pattern, a bookseller, and author of The Passover Guest. And Rebecca Levitan is a librarian, book reviewer, editor, former chair of the Sidney Taylor Book Award Committee. And Sylvie Schaffer is also a librarian, and she's on the Holiday Highlights Committee, as well as the Geisel Award Committee, and also served on the Sidney Book Taylor Award Committee. And that's it. How did I do in the last names?
You did perfect on the last names. So I would add actually that all of us have been on the Sidney Taylor Book Award Committee, and Heidi, Rebecca, and I have all been chairs of it.
And Sylvie would have been a chair if she had said yes. When
I know, we tried our best, but you know.
It was full. Another time.
Another time. So yeah, so the Sidney Taylor Book Award is a very active part of all of our lives, and you'll be hearing about it later.
I'm going to be turning off my screen. I don't know if you want all the guests to turn up their screen also.
Oh no,
it's up to you. We're going to start showing slides in a moment, so okay. You know, we won't really be looking at each other's screens that much, but you're welcome to keep it on or off, however you like. Okay, so I think we're ready to start the slides, correct? Right, gang? Okay, here we go. Okay, so we're very pleased to be here to present how to be an ally to Jewish patrons and students, even in a non-Jewish neighborhood. And this is co-sponsored. We're very excited to co-sponsor between the Association of Jewish Libraries and Storytime Solidarity. Thank you for partnering with us. So what is the Association of Jewish Libraries? It's a professional organization for those with an interest in Jewish books or libraries. You don't have to be Jewish. You don't have to be a librarian. You just have to be interested. It's as you can see, the leading authority on Judaic librarianship, and it's a volunteer-run nonprofit. So members include librarians from synagogues, universities, public libraries, museums, archives, as well as members who are authors, publishers, historians, booksellers, avid readers, just anybody who's interested in this topic. And this is us. You heard a little bit about us already. Okay, Susan, over to you. You're muted.
All right, I'm not muted anymore. Okay, so we actually give this presentation from time to time, and this part always comes to me because I always have a lot to say about this. But Heidi has made this slide very, very easy to understand, I think. So Jews are 2% of the US population. And however, so the FBI, which tracks hate crime data, the most recent statistics that we have show that 60% of religious hate crimes, 60% are committed against Jews, which really doesn't make sense given the 2% of the population. The next religion down is 13% for people in the Muslim religion. So the number committed against Jews is so high. And actually, I feel, and as do many people, that number is actually pretty low right now because there's been a real rise in the last year or two. And those numbers are from 2019 as our most recent. Heidi's put here a few recent things that have happened. As you may be aware, there was shooting at the Tree of Life congregation in Pittsburgh. There were attacks in Brooklyn. This really horrific recent event with hostages being held at the synagogue in Texas, and Mouse, which is a Pulitzer Prize winning book about the Holocaust, being banned. So those are recent things. They're not happening in the 1940s in Germany. They're happening right now today in the United States. And the other thing that I mention a lot whenever we talk about this is I'm a synagogue librarian. I work in a synagogue, and there are guards at the door. There are cameras, there are alarms, there's a panic button by my desk. Since this hostage situation in Texas, there has been training or some work on how to protect the synagogue every single day since that hostage situation. And really since the Pittsburgh situation several years ago. So it's been an intense time in the Jewish community. The anti-Semitism is very real. I think that's what we're trying to convey.
Right. And we bring this up, we know you know this, but the point is, why do we need a workshop like this? This is why. So, and why do we need a workshop like this, even for those who don't work with Jewish patrons? Well, first of all, you don't actually know necessarily whether you're in a neighborhood with Jewish people or not, because it's not always visible. It's an ethnicity that there are typical markers of Judaism that you can spot, but not always. And I like to show this picture from We Need Diverse Books because every child in that picture could be Jewish. Even the hijabi girl could have Jewish heritage. So everybody in this picture, even though it looks like maybe there are no Jewish people, it's possible that there are a few or even everybody there. And then, of course, the window is in this picture because we all know the wonderful metaphor from Dr. Rudine Sims Bishop about mirrors and windows, that mirror books reflect your experience back to you, and window books let you see what it's like in somebody else's experience. So it's really very important, even more important in a neighborhood that doesn't have a lot of Jewish people, that there should be window books that allow people to see the Jewish experience. Because if you don't have the opportunity to meet real live Jews, at least you should meet some on the page so that Judaism becomes demystified and not scary, and that people can empathize. So it's actually even more important in a non-Jewish neighborhood.
Okay, so we have a few things to tell you about Jews and Jewish books that we want to give you some basic knowledge. Heidi, you got the next slide? All right, so Jews are not all white or white presenting. It is estimated that 12 to 20% of U.S. Jews are African American, Latino, Hispanic, Asian, Sephardic, Mizrahi, and mixed race. So just because somebody, looks one way, they may be Jewish or be not Jewish, and so judging based on color is not enough. So we come in all colors, and then the next slide. Other important things we want you to know: Hanukkah is actually a minor holiday. It's sort of been built up as this counterweight to Christmas, but in rankings of importance, it's actually not such an important holiday. Other holidays that are super important: Passover in the spring, Shavuot, which is when we receive the Ten Commandments, that's in the early summertime. Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, those are all the fall high holidays. These are all way more important than Hanukkah, and Hanukkah just ends up being the important one because it's right at the same time as Christmas.
So Judaism comes in many different flavors. Under this Jewish umbrella, there's a lot of different forms of practice. You may or may not have heard of Orthodox, Conservative, Reform, and Reconstructionist. And there's a misunderstanding, a common misunderstanding, that Orthodoxy is at the top of the list and Reform or Reconstructionist is at the bottom, and that if you're Orthodox, you're more Jewish, and if you're Reform, you're less Jewish. And it's not true. There are different ways of practicing. There are different ways of identifying yourself within this umbrella of Jewish practice. But there are so many different ways of being Jewish, and an individual's practice might be influenced from their family. It might be influenced geographically. People might do A and not B. Some people might keep kosher, but only inside their house. Some people might acknowledge the Sabbath or do certain practices on the Sabbath, but they might not be like totally Shomer Shabbat or keep all of the pieces of it. So there's just like a lot of different ways. None of them are wrong. None of them are right. It's just, it is what it is. Jews are Jews. And if you ask two rabbis, what's the right way to do this, you'll get at least 3 opinions. So there's just lots of different ways of being Jewish. And not all of them have to do specifically with religious practice either. Cultural heritage is very important in Judaism. And you don't have a bar or bat mitzvah, you become a bar or bat mitzvah. The words actually mean child of the commandment, son or daughter of the commandment. And we've seen a lot of representation, maybe overrepresentation within middle grade Jewish fiction of the bar mitzvah being this like big, important, culminating event. And while it is a really big, important event in a Jewish teen's life or tween's life, it is not the end. It's not the thing you work hard for and then you're done and you get to tap out. It's the beginning of your life as a Jewish adult and accepting all of the beauty of the religion and being, you're like, it's like you level up. It's not game over, it's level up. So it's important to remember that. It's not about the party or the swag or the sweatshirt.
So this has been a concerning thing that we've been seeing a lot of lately, and I wanted to address it because it's really been bothering me. It has been very difficult to publish books about Israel, which understandably is a bit of a hot, a difficult point, and I get that. But what we've been seeing happening is that there are books coming out that are factually incorrect. Like even you can, let's say a book that says like that Tel Aviv is the capital of Israel, when in fact the capital of Israel is Jerusalem. I mean, that's a fact. You can't really challenge that fact. And so what happens, what we're seeing happening is when we approach libraries about it and say, well, you have a factually incorrect book in your library. They, as a library, I understand this. As a librarian, we don't want to pull books from the shelves and we get very defensive. And so when we talk to libraries, what they do is they hand, us challenge forms, and then they don't want to take the books out of the library because now they see it as a challenge. And I would encourage you that if you are in this position, first to make sure that the books you're putting in the library are accurate, particularly around Israel, where we see a lot of bias. So for example, we saw a book about influential women in the Middle East featuring nobody from Israel. There's some bias in that. So I would, one, encourage you to look beyond the bias and be aware of it, but two, to be aware that that this isn't a challenge, that there needs to be factual information in this area. All right, the Holocaust. Okay, well, listen, I think it's extremely important to, well, let me go back. Okay, the majority of children's books with Jewish content are about the Holocaust. The Holocaust was an important event that had huge huge impact on the Jewish community, and we truly should never forget. And publishers help us remember by creating endless books on the subject. However, the drama and the pathos of Holocaust books has made them an easy sell for publishers, which has created a vicious cycle of more and more and more and more Holocaust books being published. And we now have this glut of Holocaust books. At this point, when we ran the numbers of just in the last, 5 or so years, 10 or so years, we found half the books published in the Jewish children's market were Holocaust books. It's important for you to be aware that the number of Holocaust books available does not represent the importance of the topic in modern Jewish life. When a child asks for a Jewish book, Holocaust books can sometimes be the only books with Jewish representation available in some collections. And please be mindful that handing a Holocaust book to a Jewish reader who hasn't asked for one may be hurtful. Jews are more than our worst moment, and please let's show that to our children. We can't just be about the Holocaust. You can see these slides are such a small fraction of the Holocaust books, even on the market right now, not ever published. And it has become really overwhelming. And Anne Frank, a wonderful, incredible person, but we're up to 5 to 10 new books about Anne Frank every year. So I would really like to see us go beyond that. So, and this is part of topics that receive a lot of focus. So in addition to the Holocaust, we also see, wait, hang on one second. Okay, I can't talk this fast. We also see other forms of persecution, such as anti-Semitism, pogroms, and the Inquisition. I always joke that if we don't get the Holocaust, we get a book about the Inquisition, which again is not Jewish joy. We also get a lot about the shtetl, which is kind of like the Fiddler on the Roof setting, Helm, which is about the Village of Fools and Jewish folklore, immigration, Ellis Island, Lower East Side. We're not seeing a lot of joy in that. Hanukkah, which Rebecca mentioned earlier, can be sometimes problematic. Ruth Bader Ginsburg is an interesting anomaly about in 2015, the first children's book on Ruth Bader Ginsburg was published. We're now up to almost 100, and they just keep coming out. And I have nothing but admiration for Ruth Bader Ginsburg, but it's too much. There are hundreds of other Jewish people, Jewish women to write about and to recommend to kids asking for it. Einstein, Houdini, and Hank Greenberg are also very common biography subjects, and there are many excellent books on these topics. We're not saying these books shouldn't be published, but there's a lot more to the Jewish people than just this. So what do we want to see more of? Okay. We want to see more titles that are unique, humorous, modern, fantasy, sci-fi, casual Judaism, biographies of people we haven't already heard about, settings other than New York City and Lower East Side, neurodiverse Jews, queer Jews, Jewish early readers, transitional books, more board books. I want to be able to walk into my synagogue library and see this exact same diversity of subject matter and the exact same high quality of books that I can see in a public library children's room. We are especially excited to see books that go beyond the common Jewish settings of the old country and the Lower East Side and always take place in the past, right? When we look at, I find that we so often are showing kids that Jews existed a long time ago, and that's it. Jews exist now, and we exist all over the world, and it's great to show books that reflect our reality. We do want to honor our past, so sometimes we transform it. So, for example, up here, you see something I did. I recently published a picture book last year, and I took this older folk tale, The Magician, by I.L. Peretz, who is a famous Yiddish writer, and it was originally set in Poland, and I moved it more contemporarily to Washington, D.C. and the Depression. And, now it's in the 21st century, and it feels newer. And some of these others also are newer and fresher in different places and different time periods. And I think that diversity of time and location is very important in Jewish children's books, because there isn't as much of it as you would think.
Thank you, Susan. So I just want to point out and make clear that Judaism is more than a religion, it's a culture. And traditionally, Jews do not proselytize. So we want to make it clear that as we're talking to you about including Jewish books in your collection, we are not promoting Jewish sacred texts. We are not trying to teach non-Jewish readers to practice Judaism. We just want all readers to read Jewish books as window books and bridge builders. We want to be seen, we want to be understood, as all people do. And so Jewish books are, as many of the books that we're showing you, are not about religion per se. So we want to talk about opportunities for inclusion, ways that you can include Jews and other minorities in library spaces and in the diversity conversation. And we're co-sponsored today by Storytime Solidarity. So let's take a moment to talk about Storytime. Now, first of all, we're not actually suggesting that non-Jewish librarians should do a whole Jewish story time, because honestly, that would be a little bit weird. It might feel a little bit like cultural appropriation. It might feel kind of like exoticizing. So we're not actually asking you to do that. What we are asking is that if you are creating a diverse mix of books for a story time or some other program, that you include Jews among the diversities, the diverse groups being represented. And so here on the screen, you can see examples of books that are not about religion, are not even about Jewish holidays. They are just books that have Jewish characters, or some are based on a Jewish folktale or legend, or include a Jewish food or a Jewish value or a character who just happens to be Jewish. And any of these are stories that would work well in a story time. You can see there's a music related one. If you have a music related story time, stick in a Jewish music book. If you're talking about food, add a Jewish food book. So you can have some other universal theme and then pick a Jewish book to go along with all the other diverse books that you might be using in that story time. Also, if you do want to have a specifically Jewish story time and you don't have the expertise to choose the books, or if you're not comfortable with pronouncing the words, or if you just don't know what to do, you can invite a Jewish organization to help you out and come do a program. So there might be a local Jewish community center, a JCC, that might do it, or a synagogue, especially if they have a librarian in that synagogue. As you can see, you've got 2 synagogue librarians right here, so that is something you can find sometimes. And there's PJ Library, which is a program that exists around the world, across the country and around the world, which is a program that offers free Jewish books to families. It's a books by mail club, basically. And they have local representatives who are happy to come and do programming in public spaces. So that's another way that you can add some Judaism to your diverse mix of programming. So beyond that, you can also add Jewish diversity in workshops, seminars, and conferences, including Jewish speakers on your program. If you're, inviting a diverse panel of people or various speakers. If you're featuring books, of course, you can include Jewish books. And then we're going to talk a little bit more about this, but considering the timing so that it's easy for Jews to participate. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. You can also, of course, if you're creating a book list, you can see that these are wonderful book lists with people of color, people of different backgrounds, and Jews should be included on those kinds of book lists as well. And please remember that while Jews of color are obviously diverse, so are white identifying Jews. We are intersectional, just like white queer folks, white Latinx folks, white people with differing physical or neurological abilities, and so on. Jews are part of that intersectional, diverse community. Rebecca,
Okay.
unmute.
So, other ways your library spaces can be inclusive. Library displays. If you create a library display for Christian holidays, please do so for other religions. And consider doing a full display, not just adding 1 or 2 Hanukkah books onto your Christmas display. At that point, it just feels like tokenizing. Or consider not doing holiday displays at all, instead of, oh goodness, instead of doing a holiday display in the wintertime, perhaps, something else altogether. I know Sylvie comes up with some great displays involving bears or food or gross out body parts. Anything and everything can be a display, and you can avoid that uncomfortableness about not including people who should be included. Also, and if you are creating some of these displays that are not specifically holidays, if you have a STEM display, if you've got cookbooks, if you've got, joke books, try and see if you can include Jewish books in there as well. Okay. Thank you, Heidi. All right, potential partnerships. In your community, you might have tweens and teens looking to do a mitzvah project. This is really common among bar and bat mitzvah kids who are, they're turning 12, 13, they're getting to be, part of the adult community, and so one of the things that's really common is they'll do some kind of service, learning hours, some sort of volunteer project. Maybe they're collecting food for a food bank, maybe they're doing something for kids in a hospital, but maybe it's an opportunity for libraries to reach out to the community and say, hey, if you have that possibility, we're available for you to do your mitzvah project. JCCs, your Jewish community centers, they often have vibrant early childhood and youth programming. You could flyer their bulletin boards and reach new audiences, or you can try and partner with them and see if maybe they can come do programs with you. I know here in Baltimore, the Jewish Community Center works with the city libraries, the Enoch Pratt libraries, and does a hands-on holiday program. Well, they'll come in and do a holiday-related story time, completely not religious, very culturally Jewish. So that's a possibility also. That's partnerships. Okay, this is my big plea. Consider the calendar. Judaism is a lunar-based, mostly, calendar. Our holidays start the night before and go to the next day, and while we are a lunar-based calendar, unlike the Muslim calendar, which sort of fixed to solar also, so while in the Muslim calendar, Ramadan may switch around the entire year, ours tend to stay within the same holiday. So Passover will always be in the springtime, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur will always be in the fall, Hanukkah will always be in the winter. So double check that you are not conflicting with Jewish holidays, and you can easily do that at hebcal.com, hebcal.com. It's there. It's all that information. You can check the candle lighting times for what time the holiday starts in your area. It's a really, really great resource. So some of these major holidays don't program over. Hanukkah, you can program over. It's a minor holiday. Also, for Jews who keep Shabbat, keep the Sabbath, programs from Friday night to Saturday night are going to be off limits. So consider switching up the timing of your programming to make it more accessible to your community members. Not everything on a Saturday, and also just be aware that, some of these things may affect other groups too, such as your Muslim customers as well. Okay, consider your snacks. If you are a library that ever provides snacks, please be considerate of those who keep kosher. Putting out food in its original packaging that displays kosher symbols. On the screen, you see 4 of the most common symbols, or uncut hand fruit will ensure that your kosher keeping patrons can feel included. Take a look at these symbols, and the next time you go to your pantry or the grocery store, start looking for them, and you'd be surprised how many items have these kosher symbols. So it really shouldn't be too hard to be inclusive to any kosher keeping patrons. Also, a lot of people who keep halal are comfortable with things that are kosher. I can't speak for everybody, but this also gives you a better chance of being more inclusive. Okay, kosher.
It's not just in books that are Jewish content with a Jewish author that there is Jewish representation. If you start to look for it, you'll see that there are Jews. Just Harriet is so cute. I just read it a couple weeks ago. It's the newest one by Alana K. Arnold. And there isn't really any Jewish content in the book per se, except that her cat is named Matzo Ball. And so it's just a quick little nod. And there's some crowd scenes here. I think one is from Don't Eat Your Classmates and one is from Change Sings. In both of those illustrations, again, it's not named in the text, but through the illustration, we have the inclusion of two little boys wearing kippot or yarmulkes, head coverings. This is in the top right corner, an illustration from a updated Night Before Christmas. And you can see that this shows it's an interfaith household with, in addition to the stocking hung and the wreath and everything, there's also a menorah on the mantle. So helping people literally feel seen. They're seeing themselves in the illustration. They're seeing that cat named Matzo Ball or the kid wearing the kippah or the yarmulke. There's Jewish representation in larger anthologies of short stories. And a book can be Jew-ish without being Jewish. And that ish really can go a long way in helping people feel seen.
Okay, so where do you find quality Jewish kidlit? We're asking you to include it. How are you going to find it? The most obvious to us place to look is the Sidney Taylor Book Award. As we mentioned, all of us have been on this committee. This is basically the Jewish Caldecott and Newbery. It is a children's literature prize established in 1968, awarded by the Association of Jewish Libraries, and in memory of the author Sidney Taylor, who was the author of the All of a Kind Family series, and her daughter continues to support this award. Since 2019, this award has been announced at ALA's Youth Media Awards, along with all of the other big awards for children's literature. So we're very excited that is the case. So there are winners, honors, and notables every year in 3 categories: picture books, middle grade, and young adults. And so this is a great place to start if you're looking for quality Jewish books. These books have been vetted and are worth your attention. Some other resources that can help you find good Jewish books. The Association of Jewish Libraries does many projects related to Jewish books for children and of course for adults as well. So as I said, the Sidney Taylor is part of the Association of Jewish Libraries, but the entire website has other resources. There's a bibliography bank that you can find on the website. There is a series of recommended reading lists called Love Your Neighbor, which was created specifically to reach out to non-Jewish readers and help demystify various aspects of Judaism. The Sidney Taylor Schmooze is a mock award blog, mock award for the Sidney Taylor Book Award, and there are book reviews year-round of Jewish books as they are coming out. The Jewish Book Council is another organization that has a lot of reading lists that you can find online. And Tablet is an online Jewish magazine, and they have annual articles about the best Jewish children's books of the year. And I've actually got, I have a handout for you, and there's going to be links to all of this. Another project of the Association of Jewish Libraries we mentioned earlier is Holiday Highlights, and this is a twice a year for the spring and fall publishing seasons. We put out a list of the best Jewish holiday books to help you identify which ones are worth your hard-earned spending dollars. My podcast, The Book of Life, I've been doing this since forever, since 2005, lots of interviews with authors, publishers, and so on. So you can learn a deep dive about many different Jewish books mostly for children, some for adults. And just to mention, if you are also interested in adult books, AJL also now sponsors a new podcast called Nice Jewish Books, which is about adult fiction. So there are many, many places that you can find guidance to get the best Jewish books, especially Jewish children's books.
I love this Smokey the Bear. So instead of only you can prevent forest fires, which is also true, only you can leverage the power that you have as a librarian to include Jewish books wherever possible, include Jewish stories whenever possible. If you're putting together a summer reading display or book list, if you're working with local teachers, if you're working with parents, always go out of your way to include books that show Jewish topics, Jewish people, Jewish history and culture, but also Jewish now, very much important to include Jewish now, here and now. And I would say disrupting the default is something that only gets easier the more that you do it. So if you have a display idea that you always put up the same 20 books because you know they're going to circle off the display, go into your catalog and see if you might have a Jewish book that fits that display. If you're putting together selections for a story time, where can you fit something Jewish in there? We're only 2%, but that doesn't mean you should leave us out. So please don't. And thank you.
So we've got plenty of time for questions.
Heidi, you muted.
Sorry, I'm going to spotlight. Thank you for telling me I was muted. I'm going to spotlight us so that you can find us easily in this screen full of people. And then we are open for questions. And I see there's a lot in the chat. Oh, good. So people were posting. I couldn't look at it while I was running the slides, but I see that people are posting some very good links to some of the resources that we mentioned. I'm going to post a link to the handout right now. And does anybody have any comments or questions?
Feel free to like unmute and just shout them.
Yeah.
Since no one else is saying, since you said comments, this was just a truly excellent presentation from so many perspectives. All of you just wonderful. And I just wish that public libraries, I don't know, can you do this for ALA? I mean, I'm not a librarian. Sorry if that's not culturally what one would say, but I just really wish you would be doing this multiple times a week, or maybe make a recording, because this was truly extraordinary.
We feel like we're getting there to multiple times a week. So I've had a goal, and I've kind of dragged everybody into this, and I'm sorry about that, but to try to present this kind of information to everybody. So with that goal in mind, we've been to libraries, to bookstores, to publishers, to teachers, to, if you'll have us, we'll come speak, essentially, because I think that there are a lot of stereotypes and there are a lot of issues in Jewish children's literature, and that are just roadblocks, and that are keeping from kids getting the books that they deserve to get. And I don't think that that's right. And so I want to kind of take those walls down. So I have dragged my friends and colleagues here around the country and around Zoom with me, and they have been really willing and gracious and knowledgeable.
We come willingly. She didn't drag us.
No, yeah.
But yeah, so we have, I mean, the truth also, to just be very blunt about it, is we get rejected a lot when we propose, because nobody sees the need, because we're not really part of the diversity conversation. And so the number of times a presentation like this has been rejected, I have lost track, because who needs it, right? And it's like over and over and over and over again, and it's not accidental. But we did present at, we didn't present at what I would call big ALA. We presented with the big annual conference. We presented this first actually at Aust Institute, the Association of Library Service to Children, so a smaller division. And that was really great to be able to present this to children's librarians. And we're next taking the show on the road to the Kegler Festival, which is a library school and festival. And if anyone wants us to talk to anybody, we will.
I also want to point out that we are recording, and
Yeah.
this is a public program, so the recording will be freely available on the AJL YouTube channel. So actually, I'll find the link to the AJL YouTube channel and give that to you right now also.
Yeah, books.
So
that
I have a question.
Oh, go ahead.
Greetings. I'm a new member of the organization. I'm very excited to be connected with you all here.
Welcome. We're so excited by new members.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I'm very excited. I retired recently from being in a public school library, and been able to connect with you has been just really wonderful. Question about connecting with the SCBWI. They do their online, I forget what they're calling them, the digital workshops. This would be fabulous there. Yes,
Okay.
Susan.
Once again, and like I said, I don't think there's an organization I haven't targeted at this point. I have given, I was on a panel several months ago where I was a member of a diverse community, and I was very honored that they asked a Jewish person to be on the panel, which is incredibly unusual. And I said I made a lot of these points, and it was the SCBWI in New England. I have not yet achieved big SCBWI. I don't think that's their phrase. That's just ALA thing. But Sylvie got my joke. But SCBWI is in my, they're on my list.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. And if I can be helpful in any way, I'm a member of SCBWI, and I run a critique group here in New Jersey for SCBWI. Maybe starting small, starting just with a state, maybe New Jersey would be open to something. They're having a hopefully live conference in June, I believe, coming up. So let's talk more. Maybe I can help make a connection there.
Happy to. I'm a member, happy to. I will speak to anybody, and I know my colleagues will as well.
Great, thank you.
I see a question in the chat. I'm sorry, was somebody about to say something?
I was, but I'll talk later.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I can hear your frustration with getting dismissed because people don't need to know. They already know about Jewish people. It's ridiculous because there's such a disconnect for me, because when we shared, especially Heidi's first article, people were commenting that they didn't even know that Jew wasn't a slur. So we're starting with such low levels of knowledge. Like Heidi had to encourage us, it's okay to say Jew. It doesn't need to be an ugly word. It's just a descriptor. And we didn't even have that to start. And yet people think, oh, there isn't this need for this diversity, when we don't even know what to call people accurately. We're too afraid. And yet we're not trying to learn in a way that I think would actually benefit everyone.
Yeah, and that's a really interesting thing, because, the word Jew is just, that's who we are. But because you hear, like you see World War II movies and you hear Nazis saying that word in a venomous way, it has become associated with negativity. But honestly, it's a word that just needs to be reclaimed. It's just a plain old descriptor.
And you deserve, this community, all communities deserve the opportunity to reclaim their words. And it makes me sad that there aren't enough opportunities there. So we're hoping, we can keep creating opportunities with our group.
Yeah, well, thank you, Kate. I really want to applaud Storytime Solidarity for recognizing Jews as diverse and being so supportive, because this is the kind of support and partnership that we're looking for all over the place, and that sometimes we don't find, as Susan was saying.
I'm seeing a couple. Oh, go ahead, Heidi.
I was going to say there was something in the chat that I thought.
Yes, I was going to say the same thing.
Okay, well, the first one that I noticed, I don't know if this is the same one you were noticing.
Yeah. Yeah.
It says, wondering if we have recommendations for books that would work for toddler story times with big illustrations and less text. And I did want to say that on the newest holiday highlights list, there were a couple of board books that we recognized, and that was part of a series of board books that's, so they're not all holiday books. The two we recognized on that list obviously are. One was for Shabbat and one was for Havdalah, which is the ceremony marking the end of Shabbat on Saturday night. But those are by Vicki Weber, and they're from Apples and Honey Press. And I think there were 4 in the series at this point. And I remember, Susan, that you compared them to Helen Oxenberry's work. So those, I think, would be pretty good. Sylvie, did you say that?
Say that too, Sylvie? Yeah, so they look very much like Helen Oxenberry. I will say, and I absolutely recommend this series. I will say that this is really tough. So I'm someone who does story times as Heidi does in synagogues, and doing story times with Jewish books is not, I came from a public library, children's librarian. It's not the easiest thing because a lot of the Jewish books, they're historical, they're longer, they have a lot of text. To find a really good read aloud story book for kids, it's a challenge. And once I find them, it's like I read that book for like 10 years because is that your experience as well, Heidi? I find it
absolutely
Jewish,
right. It's
loud Jewish
like for elementary school kids and up, the picture books are wonderful. But for preschool, it's hard.
It's very hard.
It's hard to find books with Jewish content that will hold the attention of kids that young, honestly. And so I'm putting that out there as a challenge to publishers and authors.
Yeah, you find that too, where people, there are genres where like we've decided that these are Jewish genres. Like if I have a kid who walks in and they say, I like the Lightning Thief, what else you got? I almost have to say, sorry, kid, there's not, there's these 3 books, but I don't really have much for you because there's not a lot of Jewish fantasy. But if you'd like a good, Holocaust or historical fiction novel, I can help you for days. So
that's changing.
It's starting to change. But yeah, so it's just interesting to note. There are some other interesting comments in here. I want to thank Edie for sharing with your public library staff and particularly administration. That is deeply appreciated, and I hope others do that as well. Administration, thank you.
Hi, can I jump in?
Yes.
This is fascinating. I'm sorry, I had a conflicting Zoom for 2 hours. And I asked the question about books focusing on the rich variety, not only of Jews, but interaction with people of color. And you gave me some links, and I'll follow them up, but I'd be curious if someone could give me a little bit more detail of what kind of storylines there might be. I guess we're really talking about books for teenagers and young adults, whether these are fiction or general kind of almost documentary-like books.
I'm not entirely, I'm a little lost on what you're looking for, but like books that are dealing with Jewish people interacting with people of color, a lot of the ones we come across are historical, like rabbis who marched with Martin Luther King, and boys who play baseball in the back alley together, and stuff like that.
These would appear under what kind of titles? How would you even find them?
Can you clarify what exactly you're looking for?
I'm looking for books that would not buried in a paragraph, but present in a broader framework in contemporary life more, maybe the past 20 or 30 years, Jewish engagement with whether it be civil rights work or neighborhood or community development work or classes with people of color.
Okay, so I would recommend looking at the Love Your Neighbor lists, because there are some lists there about allyship and being friends and bridge building. So you're going to find some of those kind of titles there. I also want to point out that the way you're framing the question is kind of assuming the default of white Jews, which, you know, the majority of Jews
Is
are.
the
But
default.
it's the default, but we also have to remember that it's not all there is. And so, and you're seeing more and more in modern Jewish children's books, you're seeing more and more Jews of color as well. And especially, I would say, in picture books where there's an opportunity to have a crowd scene, there are a lot, probably a higher proportion of Jews of color in modern picture books than maybe even there are in real life.
That's
because
fascinating.
the
I wasn't
illustrations
aware
are
of that.
very conscious these days about being inclusive in that way.
Well, that's great. Okay.
I really want to get to this point that Kelly made. This question Kelly asked before we run out of time. Kelly says, we have a separate section in our holiday books for Hanukkah books. I have been on the lookout for other Jewish holiday books, as I know we have a few Jewish families who are active in the library. At this point, I don't think there are enough to do a separate section for other holidays. Would it be appropriate to have a section called Jewish holidays with holidays lumped together? Or, okay, I have a really strong opinion about this. No, don't do that, please, because I want you to. So a lot of times when we're talking about Jewish stuff, it's helpful to pull it out and talk about Christian stuff, right? Because then it's easier, right? So, like, for example, think about, like, if I have to take off for Yom Kippur, what would it be like for you to take off for Christmas? Think about that. So I want to put that here, right? So if I'm a Jewish person and I have to walk to a shelf where my Sukkot book is mixed up with my Passover books, what would it be like to have my Halloween books mixed up with my, you know, Valentine's Day books? I don't want that. Even if you have one Valentine's Day book, right? You're not going to jumble it up with your 3 Halloween books. You wouldn't do that. It would be confusing. So please don't do that to the Passover books and the Sukkot books. If you can't figure out what they are, you know, there are lots of ways to determine which holiday it is. We can help you. The Library of Congress cataloging can help you. Dewey can help you. Lots of things can help you. But please, 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 I hate when I walk into public libraries and, like, there are 30 books. I'm trying to find a Passover book, and, like, there's a Passover book here and a Passover book here and a Passover book here. And I'm like, just put them together like you would for any Christian holiday.
But
And
Susan, what do you think about if there was a Jewish holiday section and then divided within it?
That's
But
fine.
wait, 2 Jews, 3 opinions, or 3 Jews, 4 opinions. In my library, which is an elementary school library, I have a holiday section, and I have holidays from across different faiths all together in the holiday section. And there I have them arranged more or less by time of year. Now that doesn't always work out because, like, Ramadan moves, but I have them sort of seasonally-ish. And all of the holiday books, whether it's, you know, so kids were coming in last week, and on was it Thursday, I had kids come in and ask for Leprechaun books and Purim books. And I was like, yep, holiday. And so that worked out well.
Well, that's fine. To me, the question is, if you would do it for the Christian stuff, please do it for the Jewish stuff. So however you have it organized for in your library, continue that organization for the Jewish stuff as well.
So there's another thing in the chat that I think is something maybe is a good suggestion. It says, if we see a diverse panel listed in a conference program that doesn't include Jewish representation, do we have a resource template, letter, something like that, recommendations for how to address this with the organizer?
And I was going to say no, but Heidi can, you know, get that out for you.
But
in
we
like
can try
20
to create
minutes,
something.
right?
It's a good idea.
It's a good idea. But I did want to address that question and say thank you for addressing that. So in the recent years, there's been a lot of work around that where people have said, well, there aren't any women on the panel, or there aren't any people of color on the panel. And so just the idea of someone speaking up and saying, well, there aren't any Jews on this panel, that's almost making me cry, because, like, we've been trying to get on panels and it's been impossible. So it's like this invisible minority. We're being oppressed and nobody's believing us. That's this weird crux. Driving me crazy.
So with that in mind, Susan, I know that there's an adult book that you would highly recommend to help people
Well, thank
understand
you
that
for that, Heidi.
phenomenon.
It just
you-
got mentioned in the chat.
Oh, did it? Okay.
Oh, good. Yes.
Yes. So Heidi and I do like, I don't know, 57 things together. So we're kind of on the same mind. And I think at this point, so are Sylvie and Rebecca and I. So we're all thinking with one mind. Yeah. So there's a book, and thank you to Bill for mentioning it. It's called Jews Don't Count by David Baddiel. And I would particularly, if you're not Jewish, I would particularly encourage you to read this book. It frames a lot of what we're talking about, a lot of what I just said, actually, about how we don't count, how, you know, whenever we talk about diversity, we include everybody but Jewish people. And he's a British comedian, so it's even a little bit funny. It's not a very long book, and he even like has tweets in it, so it's like really short to read. And but it's a book that if you are Jewish, it's worth reading, but if you're not Jewish, it may just change the way you think a little bit. So we're really highly recommend it.
Yes.
Could you put that in the chat?
Yes, I'll include, it wasn't the chat, but I'll include a direct link to it.
Yes. Please read it. Please hand it to your friends. Think about it in terms of everything, panels, Kidlit, all of it, because it applies.
All right. Any more questions?
Did we
Guys
get
have
all the
good
ones from the chat?
I think so. If you had a question in the chat and we didn't talk about it, unmute and speak up.
May
And
we find
somebody-
out what
Oh,
Rebecca's virtual background is from?
I
Heidi's,
wanted to know
I
that
can figure
too.
yours out. And I tried to read Susan and Sylvie's. It was easier with Sylvie looking at the book jackets. I already did that, but I couldn't figure out Rebecca's.
Oh, Rebecca's is the Beast's library in Beauty and the Beast, because she was my favorite Disney princess, because she had access to this library. So that's what it is. Also, that way you don't see the dirty laundry behind me. Sorry.
Good question. All right. Anybody else? I think somebody else was trying to say something at that same time.
I was. Somebody asked us about Carben. So we are very familiar with Carben, which is part of Learner. And Rebecca very nicely pointed out there are several other Jewish-specific smaller publishers that publish a lot of these holiday books and stuff like that, and other Jewish specific content. And then, but we also encourage you to look at what I would call big five publishers, you know, Random House, not Houghton Mifflin, sorry, they just got absorbed. HarperCollins, Scholastic, because they publish high quality Jewish books, and you may not even be aware. And I think that those are well worth looking at as well. And I think that's where Sidney Taylor really helps. The Sidney Taylor Awards really helps us, really points out some of the committee really finds some of the real gems every year. And you know, if you use, you know, Caldecott or Newberry or Geisel for collection development, Sidney Taylor is a good resource for collection development. Because we not only have the winners and the honors, we also have notables on the list. And so it ends up being really excellent collection development.
Okay. Anybody else?
And Heidi, our information is on there, right? Our contact information.
Yes. Okay. So I just posted a link to the handout, which has email addresses for us if you think of a question later. And
please
has links
email.
to
Please.
We're also happy. I know I very much am. Well, in addition, I've told you that I'm open to present anywhere, anything, anytime. But in addition to that, you know, if you have a question or is this appropriate or what do you think, or, you know, please ask. We're very open and available. And I want to thank those who have joined the Association of Jewish Libraries. And if you would like to, and you have questions, we would love to answer them. We have a conference coming up in a few months in person, and we couldn't be more excited. And it's really, if any of you are going to ALA Annual, it is the next day. It's in Philadelphia. It's very close to Washington, D.C. We hope you come by, and it's not a big deal to come this year and really see some of what we're talking about in person.
Whoever's raising your hand, shout out.
Hi, I'm sorry. It's really more appropriate for the chat, but I'm disabled and my hands are giving out.
Totally
If it's
fine.
okay, if it's okay for librarians, because even if you have young kids, you may have precocious readers who want to read adult books. If you look for Yiddish Book Center's Coming to America web pages, not just immigration stories about Jewish immigrants, but other immigrants, there are all sorts of materials, and they already had their first cohort before the pandemic training public librarians. And it was something, I can't pronounce his name, so I'll just say, this program for public libraries, the Pulitzer Prize winner of The Sympathizer, reading vocabulary, I don't know how to pronounce his name. He thought it was so important, he was going to travel at his own expense back to his Northern California home public library to give a presentation associated with that. So that's a little plug for precocious adolescent readers and adult readers to find books about immigrant experience and background materials where the window becomes the mirror for immigrant families. To quote Heidi, who quoted someone else whom I don't remember.
Great, thanks. I just want to say that I think that the link I was originally sharing for the handout was the wrong link, but now I have put the correct link. I'm putting it again just to make sure. There it is. That's the correct link to the handout where you will find our information. Oh, good. I'm looking at it. I see lots of people are logging onto it. You're going to see our email addresses, links to some of the other stuff we talked about, and a summary of what we said, so you'll remember what we just told you. And then once the video is available, probably it'll take a couple days before it ends up on AJL's YouTube channel, but once it is, you can freely share that with whoever else you think might benefit from hearing this conversation.
And incidentally, a lot of you are putting these great titles into the chat, and that's so great. I wanted to point out that pretty much all of them are Sidney Taylor winners, honors, or notables. So, I'll encourage you once again to look at our lists. There's a great database on the Sidney Taylor website now. You can look up books for the last, many, many years. And so you're already reading them. You just may not know that you are.
Right. So good job recognizing quality books, everybody. All right. Well, it's 4 minutes past the hour. I'm happy to stick around if anybody else has any questions, but that's basically it for our presentation. Storytime Solidarity folks, did you have anything else that you wanted to say to wrap up?
I just wanted to thank everybody. And one thing that I noticed, and I don't know if anyone else did, I'm autistic, so I don't usually notice the same things as everyone else. But I really loved that while you were asking us to be your allies, you were trying to be allies, all of you, to other groups. Like, you talked about diversity within Jewish literature. You talked about how some things we can do to honor and welcome our Jewish guests at the library could also be done to honor other groups. And, I think that's really important. I think that we can work together, and that's why I was so excited when I met you for Storytime Solidarity, because we want to be allies, but we want to be everybody's allies, and I see so much of that here, and it really feeds into what our goals are for the group. So thank you so much. It's been such a wonderful learning experience.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much.
All right.
All right.